Online chat rooms are a fun way for children to connect, but some kids are falling victim to adult sexual predators who use chat rooms to befriend children. So clearly there are dangers. We want to know, how dangerous is this and what sort of laws we need. Tonight we talk to Bhavna Luchman, online counsellor for Childline South Africa from our Durban studios. A very warm welcome, Bhavna. Thank you for joining us. How bad is this situation?
Well, thank you for having me, Jane, and good evening to our guests. So I would say that as Childline, on our chat rooms and on our crisis line, we've had an increase in chats and calls coming through about online grooming and cyberbullying, so which make a part of our abuse category, which forms approximately 25% of our total calls. With the advent of social media, instant messaging, and online gaming, the world has just become that much smaller, and also with a whole lot of dangers for children.
And does the anonymity help those who want to get involved, the sexual predators?
Yes, actually. Well, what we found is that when a perpetrator or a predator online wants to really target a child, then we find that they would take a considerable amount of time getting to know their target. So they would view the child's profile, find out what the child's likes and dislikes are, and really, come into contact with the child and thereafter build trust with the child. And as you mentioned, the anonymity of the chat rooms, because they could pose themselves as a child themselves, close to the age of the child that's being targeted. And also, it's just that with terminology that's being used online, such as friends and followers, it just blurs those lines for children between their online world and their real world.
Okay, Bhavna, we're just going to take a quick look at how online predators do operate. Now, they lurk in chat rooms, we've just been discussing that, and send private messages. They typically prowl around Facebook and other sites. They can also use online games to connect with children. Obviously, that's very effective. And send personal messages like, text me on the way home from school, because that's the way they really get a sense of the age of the child. Or, are your parents there? Go into another room. Now, their main aim is to find a victim, obviously, and conspire for privacy. Now, Bhavna, when they're conspiring for privacy, give us a sense of what we should be looking out for. I know that they often say that you put on headphones, so, your parent can't hear what you are saying and the sort of messages, the conversations that you're having.
Yes, so what you would look out for if you are a parent, if your child has been in contact with a predator online, would be, very secretive behavior regarding their devices. Or are they particularly distressed? This is if something has already happened, and around their device. Also, you would see some sort of withdrawal from the child, from their normal social behaviors. So are they reluctant to really take out photographs that are going to be posted online by their family? Are they, very secretive? The computer can only stay in my room. My devices can only be used when mom and dad are not around. And, there's a lock on the phone that mom and dad aren't aware of. So these are signs that parents need to pick up on. And also, when you look at complete behavior changes with the child. So all of a sudden they'll have anger outbursts, they'll have appetite changes, sleep changes, because all this activity starts to take place when maybe mom and dad go to bed. So are you finding them staying up till later? These are signs that parents need to pick up on. And to a greater extent is when, if something has happened that's troubling the child. This is when we found, signs of depression and anxiety, which parents really need to look out for, because once they've been into contact with the predator online or have been cyberbullied, we find that children, begin to self-harm and also make attempts at suicide.
Oh, it's just too dreadful, isn't it? the closest I got to it was I've got 7-year-old twins, and they were with a friend, and they were playing a game. It's a pretty well-known game, and they started communicating with somebody, and then they're sort of getting the sense that something was a bit strange, so they pulled back from this person who started attacking them and just saying the most awful things to them. I mean, that's certainly one way, and I believe that a microphone often helps the perpetrator find out if you're a child or not, so you should mute those microphones, shouldn't you? I mean, how does that conversation develop from there?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the predator seems to know those little things about the children already from their online profiles, from their time spent online. When are you usually online? You know, are you playing when mom and dad aren't around?
And so using the tool to shame them as well
lounge?
into befriending them.
Yes, so they would prey on those little things like guilt and the feelings that the child has, or even maybe of loneliness. You know, if the children feel that I have no friends, but you are going to be my friend, you are playing with me online. You know, so they prey on those certain things and form a very, very strong bond of trust. We had an instance where a 14-year-old teen was playing an online game, like you've mentioned, and they befriended somebody out of South Africa. Luckily enough, this was reported to Childline. But when the parents were alerted, they weren't aware at all that the child was playing the game online, let alone talking to other adults. They didn't know that the child could have been talking to other predators. And this person had actually made plans to come to South Africa to visit the child and knew exactly what the child's house looked like through online maps, where the child schooled, even names of siblings and friends, because that was the extent of information shared between the child and the predator.
And when they get that sort of information, you just wonder how you put a stop to it, how you put a stop from it going that step further, sort of physical contact, which obviously everyone dreads to even contemplate. Where does the law come in this respect? Well,
with us being Childline, when we receive cases of such, then we would refer it to the most appropriate resource, which would be your cybercrime unit within your police services. If there's for example, the case that I was speaking about, there were also allegations of abuse made. So we would get a social worker involved from your local government departments or your local welfare. And so the cybercrime unit could go into the instance of looking through IP addresses, connectivity, and tracking down locations. If the perpetrator or the predator is known to the child, so where you mentioned threatening, shaming the child, and posting of information about the child. If the perpetrator is known, then the child should be open enough with the parents to tell them about it, and they could apply for a protection order against the Protection of Harassment Act.
And is there a specific type of person? I mean, can you spot it if you're a child or a parent? I mean, who would do such a sick thing? Tell us more about them.
Well, I think previously, when I talk about years ago now, your stranger was a typically, strange-looking person with a long coat that would lure you with sweets and, things like that. But now with somebody sitting behind the screen, they could be just about anybody, Jane. So, it's really difficult to say. And from
but
stats that
sick,
we've seen,
disturbed to do such a thing.
Could be, yes, and that doesn't necessarily take it away from the fact that these people could be normal members of your society. So they could be, well-known, your neighbors, they could be teachers, of any profession for that matter. So it's, not a typical profile that you could see, because such behavior is usually kept online, kept very secret and away from the real world that they live in.
Pavna Lichman, thank you very much for talking to us about this very dark world that we are all living in. And I should imagine that if anyone has experienced anything or they feel that their children might be caught up in this, they can get in touch with you on Childline SA. Still ahead, more than 1,000 people dead and 3 million left homeless. We go to Mozambique for an update on the desperate situation there after Cyclone Idai and Kenneth. But first, your international weather and news.